Worst epidemics and pandemics in history.
Prehistoric Epidemic. Circa 3000 BC. About 5,000 years ago, an epidemic wiped out a prehistoric village in China. The bodies of the dead were stuffed inside a house that was later burned down. No age group was spared, as the skeletons of juveniles, young adults and middle-aged people were found inside the house. The archaeological site is now called Hemine Manga and is one of the best preserved prehistoric sites in northeastern China. Archaeological and anthropological study indicates that the epidemic happened quickly enough that there was no time for proper burials, and the site was not inhabited again. Plague of Athens. 430 BC. Around 430 BC, not long after a war between Athens and Sparta began, an epidemic ravaged the people of Athens and lasted for 5 years. Some estimates put the death toll as high as 100,000 people. The Greek historian Thucydides, 460 to 400 BC, wrote that people in good health were all of a sudden attacked by violent heats in the head, and redness and inflammation in the eyes, the inward parts, such as the throat or tongue, becoming bloody and emitting an unnatural and fetid breath. Antonin Plague. AD 165 to 180. When soldiers returned to the Roman Empire from campaigning, they brought back more than the spoils of victory. The Antonin Plague, which may have been smallpox, laid waste to the army and may have killed over 5 million people in the Roman Empire. Many historians believe that the epidemic was first brought into the Roman Empire by soldiers returning home after a war against Parthia. The epidemic contributed to the end of the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace, a period from 27 BC to AD 180, when Rome was at the height of its power. Plague of Cyprian. AD 250 to 271, named after Saint Cyprian, a bishop of Carthage, a city in Tunisia, who described the epidemic as signaling the end of the world. The plague of Cyprian is estimated to have killed 5,000 people a day in Rome alone. In 2014, archaeologists in Luxor found what appears to be a mass burial site of plague victims. Their bodies were covered with a thick layer of lime, historically used as a disinfectant. Plague of Justinian. The plague is named after the Byzantine Emperor Justinian. The Byzantine Empire was ravaged by the bubonic plague, which marked the start of its decline. The plague reoccurred periodically afterward. Some estimates suggest that up to 10% of the world's population died. The Black Death. 1346 to 1353. Black Death traveled from Asia to Europe, leaving devastation in its wake. Some estimates suggest that it wiped out over half of Europe's population. It was caused by a strain of the bacterium Yersinia pestis that is likely extinct today and was spread by fleas on infected rodents. Bodies of victims were buried in mass graves. Cocoalistly Epidemic. 1545 to 1548. The infection that caused the Cocoalistly Epidemic was a form of viral hemorrhagic fever that killed 15 million inhabitants of Mexico and Central America, among a population already weakened by extreme drought. The disease proved to be utterly catastrophic. Cocoalistly is the Aztec word pest. American plagues. 16th century. The American plagues are a cluster of Eurasian diseases brought to the Americas by European explorers. These illnesses, including smallpox, contributed to the collapse of the Inca and Aztec civilizations. Some estimates suggest that 90% of the indigenous population in the Western Hemisphere was killed off. Great Plague of London. 1665 to 1666. The plague started in April 1665 and spread rapidly through the hot summer months. Fleas from plague-infected rodents were one of the main causes of transmission. By the time the plague ended, about 100,000 people, including 15% of the population of London, had died. Great Plague of Marseille. 1720 to 1723. Historical records say that the Great Plague of Marseille started when a ship called Grand Saint Antoine docked in Marseille, France, carrying a cargo of goods from the eastern Mediterranean. Although the ship was quarantined, plague still got into the city, likely through fleas on plague-infected rodents. Plague spread quickly, and over the next 3 years, as many as 100,000 people may have died in Marseille and surrounding areas. Russian Plague. 1770 to 1772. In plague ravaged Moscow, the terror of quarantined citizens erupted into violence. Riots spread through the city and culminated in the murder of Archbishop Ambrosius, who was encouraging crowds not to gather for worship. The Empress of Russia, Catherine II, was so desperate to contain the plague and restore public order that she issued a hasty decree ordering that all factories be moved from Moscow. By the time the plague ended, as many as 100,000 people may have died. Philadelphia Yellow Fever Epidemic. 1793. When yellow fever seized Philadelphia, the disease is carried and transmitted by mosquitoes, which experienced a population boom during the particularly hot and humid summer weather in Philadelphia that year. It wasn't until winter arrived, and the mosquitoes died out, that the epidemic finally stopped. By then, more than 5,000 people had died. Flu pandemic. 1889 to 1890. In the modern industrial age, new transport links made it easier for influenza viruses to wreak havoc. In just a few months, the disease spanned the globe, killing 1 million people. It took just 5 weeks for the epidemic to reach peak mortality. American polio epidemic. 1916. A polio epidemic that started in New York City caused 27,000 cases and 6,000 deaths in the United States. The disease mainly affects children and sometimes leaves survivors with permanent disabilities. Polio epidemics occurred sporadically in the United States until the Salk vaccine was developed in 1954. As the vaccine became widely available, cases in the United States declined. Spanish flu. 1918 to 1920. An estimated 500 million people from the South Seas to the North Pole fell victim to Spanish flu. 1/5 of those died, with some indigenous communities pushed to the brink of extinction. The flu's spread and lethality was enhanced by the cramped conditions of soldiers and poor wartime nutrition that many people were experiencing during World War I. Despite the name Spanish flu, the disease likely did not start in Spain. Asian flu. 1957–1958. The Asian flu pandemic was another global showing for influenza. With its roots in China, the disease claimed more than 1 million lives. The virus that caused the pandemic was a blend of avian flu viruses. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention notes that the disease spread rapidly and was reported in Singapore in February 1957, Hong Kong in April 1957, and the coastal cities of the United States in the summer of 1957. The total death toll was more than 1.1 million worldwide, with 116,000 deaths occurring in the United States. AIDS pandemic and epidemic. 1981 has claimed an estimated 35 million lives since it was first identified. HIV, which is the virus that causes AIDS, likely developed from a chimpanzee virus that transferred to humans in West Africa in the 1920s. The virus made its way around the world, and AIDS was a pandemic by the late 20th century. For decades, the disease had no known cure, but medication developed in the 1990s now allows people with the disease to experience a normal lifespan with regular treatment. H1N1 swine flu pandemic. The 2009 swine flu pandemic was caused by a new strain of H1N1 that originated in Mexico in the spring of 2009 before spreading to the rest of the world. In 1 year, the virus infected as many as 1.4 billion people across the globe and killed between 151,700 and 575,400 people, according to the CDC. A vaccine for the H1N1 virus that caused the swine flu is now included in the annual flu vaccine. West African Ebola epidemic. Ebola ravaged West Africa between 2014 and 2016, with 28,600 reported cases and 11,325 deaths. The first case to be reported was in Guinea in December 2013, then the disease quickly spread to Liberia and Sierra Leone. There is no cure for Ebola, although efforts at finding a vaccine are ongoing. The first known cases of Ebola occurred in Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1976, and the virus may have originated in bats. Zika virus epidemic. 2015 present day. The Zika virus is usually spread through mosquitoes of the Aedes genus, although it can also be sexually transmitted in humans. While Zika is usually not harmful to adults or children, it can attack infants who are still in the womb and cause birth defects. The type of mosquitoes that carry Zika flourish best in warm, humid climates, making South America, Central America and parts of the southern United States prime areas for the virus to flourish.